Okay, 50 years of diplomatic and economic ties. Let's take a closer look at that, the ties between China and Brazil. Let's bring in Einar Tangen. He's, of course, the senior fellow at the Taihe Institute and chairman of Asian Narratives. Einar, always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for taking some time. Let's talk about the long-term strategic partnership between China and Brazil, how it is evolving, both major developing nations, and both promising to make, in essence, a new start in terms of working together.
Yeah, Sean. I mean, there's so many areas. And just a few years ago, 2020, the share of exports from Brazil to China was 26%. Now it's 30%,
wow.
And you've seen an 8.9% increase in terms of that. So on the economic side, it's going very well. Now, remember, these are two with two different political systems, but it has not been an impediment to economic development and understanding. This year alone, China, instead of just sending big equipment, they sent micro seeders and things like this, things that can help family farms develop just as well as the large ones.
Yeah, and of course, Brazil obviously is importing more Chinese EVs, the batteries as well. What factors will determine if this trend continues? Because China accounts for a simply mammoth percentage of Brazil's EVs. And as we heard, Chinese companies like BYD are expanding within that nation.
Well, it's just not BYD. I mean, there's so many needs there in terms of infrastructure, especially electricity. It was mentioned earlier about transmission lines. This is really important to Brazil. They can produce the energy. They have massive areas and things like that, but getting it to the population center is very, very difficult without this kind of transmission lines. But in terms of everything, remember, Brazil has a consistent, long-term, and very large trade surplus with China, one of the few bright spots in a global downturn right now. So they have the opportunity to go out there and buy these kinds of EVs and things like that. And especially in areas where in Brazil, where there's high concentrations of people, electric vehicles make a lot of sense. And with technology advancing, it'll be a lot easier. The range of the electric vehicles is expanding yearly at about 10–15%.
Yeah, and I want to pick up on something you said just a second ago, Einar, because I went down there about a decade ago and did a story. This was on the time that Brazil was on the verge of becoming the 5th largest economy in the world. Obviously, that didn't happen, economic downturn. But at the time, we kind of focused on its agricultural produce down there. And they have such a tremendous growing season. They can grow soybeans quicker, easier than anybody on earth, get them to the market. But then they either sit or don't make it because of the roads are so bad. So what is this going to mean, this continued ties between China and Brazil, because they both see what both countries need?
Well, absolutely. I mean, and infrastructure, this is a perfect example of how important infrastructure is. Producing something you can't get to market, it's just going to create losses for you. But it goes beyond that, Sean. I mean, we're talking about sharing technology, not hoarding it, not trying to seek rents from it. And that goes back many, many years. I mean, at the very beginning of the relationship almost 50 years ago, they agreed to do joint satellites. They've launched 6 of these, not for military, but for agricultural and climate change issues. Solar, the whole issue of transitioning to a more green economy, very important to a country that's very aware of its position in the global ecosystem because of the Amazon forest and things like this. So this idea of sharing technology, the fact that BYD is putting plants in Brazil, that's going to create jobs, very, very important, very different than other countries, Europe and the United States in particular, where the tendency is to say, look, this is our technology, we'll lease it or rent it to you or whatever, or you should just buy it from us.
Yeah, I also want to talk more about the relationship between Chinese investment and Brazil's infrastructure moving forward, because obviously the Amazon basin's there, the lungs of the world, what that area is called. China has its focus on the environment moving forward. Talk about this view that China has in terms of Brazil's influence in South America, and how these green ties you think are going to be so important in the coming decades.
Well, obviously, the largest economy in South America, there are, linguistics differences because, it's Portuguese in Brazil and Spanish everywhere else. But there's a growing sense among most of the countries that they need to be, more accommodating to each other. There are a lot of, kind of historical grudges that are out there about land, et cetera. Those have to be put away. I mean, there's a sense of a growing global South. And also, it helps that China is kind of anchoring this because they're giving an opportunity to Chile, Argentina, Brazil, you name it, to export. To have an export market as their exports to the U.S. decline. Remember, China is the #1 destination for exports coming from South America, Brazil, and this is what is important: the ability not only to produce but to get it to market,
Right.
and the sense that we want to help you stand on your own, not be some sort of subservient producer.